Hello, and welcome to Take This TV, the television book club podcast where each week we watch an episode or two of our favorite shows and we talk about them with our friends in the fandom, and that's you.
You.
This week we're talking about Constellation.
Yep, and today we're on episode 4, The Left Hand of God. Joe's life back home is not how she remembers it, and growing tension with Magnus adds to her feeling of alienation. Ooh. So this episode kicks off once again with a wild intro. We have Alice being led by her dad, and they're going to a cabin and saying, remember the last time we were here, the last time I was with Mama, and he's like, she's not going to be here now, we're not going to see her again.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Where's Mama?
I love the mystery. Where's Mom?
This show is so good about, like, every time they answer one question, they have 3 more for you, and I don't know what to think every episode.
It's pretty wild. It feels like we're in the alternate universe or something again. In this episode, we get more and more evidence that this might not be Joe's universe. She starts by saying that the cupboard's been changed around, which Magnus is like, no, it's pretty much the same. I'm not a change around cupboards type of guy. She sees pictures where she's playing the piano, and she goes up to the piano, and she's like, she tells her therapist later, like, I don't know how to play the piano. And then also, we do find out, like we were guessing, that she was having an affair with Frederick.
Ooh.
But this Joe does not remember that and seems to adamantly love her husband.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Frederick gives her the ick.
We also get the scene with the therapist where the therapist is recommending lithium for our Joe. And we find out later that these lithium pills are the red and orange tablets that we've been seeing.
Yes, we were so suspicious about those.
Yes.
Now, I don't know. The only thing I know about Lithium is, like, the Nirvana album and song. So, is that like a red, like when Henry was writing Lithium on the board, were you like, oh man, that's bad? Or is that like a bad thing that people know about?
Well, I mean, it's given for certain things, like
Okay.
sometimes like manic depressive episodes. I know some people take lithium for that. So like certain types of things are treated with lithium.
I see.
But yeah, like you're saying, also like Henry was writing stuff on the board where he had stress and trauma, and then lithium in a big bubble, and then below it, death in space.
Yikes.
So...
Yeah, I'm like, is that a formula? The stress and trauma plus lithium-7 equal death in space?
I don't know. But so there's this hilarious scene where she's like realizing, okay, this pill that the psychiatrist has given me is the same pill that's supposed to be vitamins that, you know, I've gotten from the space agency. She puts them on the table and she's like...
The scientific method. Let me see if these two things taste the same.
But thank goodness she actually goes to the lab and like puts them in a spectrometer and analyzes them appropriately, like a scientist should, and discovers that yes, these are indeed both lithium. So, oh, and then she also breaks in. I don't know about breaks in, but sneaks in afterwards. Looks at the computer and notices that her and another person. Who was the other person?
One of the astronauts that she was with, and then she looked up some folks from past missions.
Yeah.
Who all were given.
Some were given vitamin A, and then her and somebody else were given vitamin B, which is this lithium.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it's really corporate espionage, but it's really interesting because when she gets the first batch of lithium in the pills, they tell her that it's, fiber and other kind of supplements when she first gets back. Is that the same person that she's going to see? That's not the same therapist. That's like a different person, right?
I feel like it's a different person.
Okay. My memory is kind of fuzzy. But
yeah.
So she's getting sort of like the lithium from 2 different places, which makes it seem like how are they determining who gets lithium and who gets whatever the vitamin A is?
Yeah.
So.
It seems like it's for possibly the people that have been seeing these images in space or having these visions or hearing things.
The problematic people.
Yeah.
The whistleblowers.
Uh-oh. Give them the lithium. So that's super interesting. Henry is still there working on his Cal project, and he's saying that it still doesn't want to be seen. He invites Joe into the lab, and then it starts doing the crazy dual thing again, the interference thing. And then Joe also has a reaction to it while she's in the lab, and she sees herself on the space station again.
Yeah, she's
which is
triggered.
pretty interesting. But what I loved is after that scene, when we see Joe again and she's back at the house, she goes up to the piano and is like, okay, do I know how to play this, even if I don't remember? And she starts playing the piano, and as she goes, she gets better and better and better. And it's pretty wild. Did this interference thing that happened with the lab, like, did that somehow cause it?
That's really interesting. I didn't even think about that, because I was like, oh, maybe Joe just knew how to play all along and she had forgotten. But if this is like a everything everywhere all at once moment where she just kind of gets these skills from other universes, other versions of herself, that would be really interesting.
Because one thing that struck me is that Henry says something like, in science and in physics, we're always focused on the observer effect and like how we look at something affects the experiment and the results. But what if the experiment is affecting me? And so it's like, okay, did this happen because she was there and this interference thing happened and she, like you're saying, everything all at once, like she's getting these skills all of a sudden, like it's bleeding back now that she's there and seeing it?
It did seem like the specimen was dormant until Joe showed up. So maybe because Joe was in space when the experiment happened, she has some kind of connection with it?
It seems like it.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me, too, is that we keep getting glimpses of Alice, like, seeing through to the other side. A very interesting thing happened in this episode where this whole time, this Alice has always constantly been calling for Dad. It's always Daddy when she needs help. One time in this episode, she finally said Mommy, and immediately afterwards, she sees this, like, funeral in her home and another version of herself and a photo of her mom, her dead mom.
Yeah, like a wake.
That's interesting.
Do you think, because, I feel like every time I think I've got this figured out, then something happens with Alice, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But do you think since she called for her mom that, like, that was kind of the trigger? Because maybe she called for her mom, and last episode we theorized that, like, the version of her mom, or her actual mom, is the one who's dead. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why she saw the wake? What do you think?
I think so. Because I feel like this whole time she's been saying like, last time, too, at the MRI, she's like, you look like you're dead. So I feel like that happened. I feel like there's some sort of entanglement with the mother and daughter, and maybe because they were communicating and had that connection on FaceTime when this anomaly happened, like somehow both of them, too, are kind of seeing it.
Dang.
It's interesting.
It's a strong internet connection.
We also have our Joe get some tapes from a mysterious marine agency or something like that.
Yes.
Where they recorded her in space. And then they also sent a second recording of a cosmonaut from 1967.
Yeah, so they told Joe that they know her, but she doesn't know them. And they have these recordings that they sent to her, sort of like as a way to, with this transcript, to entice her to come visit them. And on the recordings, we hear when Joe was calling out, when she was still on the space station, and she was calling out for help. And it also makes me think, like, when I first heard that, I was like, are these folks who were alive in 1967? And, like, Joe's transmission was sent to the past? But then they mentioned the cosmonaut, and I was like, oh, no, maybe there's just people who, like, have some kind of recording from 1967. What did you think?
That's interesting. I didn't know what to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be wild. She says something interesting later to Magnus, like, I was calling out and you were
going to let me die.
Yeah, you were going to let me die. Like she was being ignored.
Yeah, I mean, so the Magnus and Joe's relationship is really strained in this moment because Frederick is at their house at one point, and they sort of hash everything out. Everything comes out into the air. So our Joe was not having an affair with Frederick, but a version of Joe from this world was. And Frederick makes that known. And so Magnus feels betrayed, like Joe lied to him, and their marriage is deteriorating before our eyes in 4K. And so that's why their like argument is really heightened. Mm-hmm. And so Joe is like having a breakdown because she feels really alone. She's asking Magnus for help, but
he's not having it. He just keeps trying to get Frederick to take her to get help.
He tells her she needs to take her pills, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to me. I know that this Magnus has been through a lot. This Magnus has felt like, you know, her cheating on him has... He says that she didn't even look back, you know, when she left to go to space.
Cold-blooded.
So he's been thinking about this whole time. So I get that, but it's like he could accept this version, this like loving version of his wife that he probably has dreamed about, but can't. You know, this Magnus cannot and will not, and is still like flirting with the teacher in front of new Joe when she's giving a presentation at, you know, the daughter's class. Yeah, and just constantly kind of pushing her away and not listening to her when they're arguing. And then we have that horrible scene at the end where he's on the phone with Frederick. He's trying to get Frederick over there, and she pushes him, and he accidentally falls and hits his head on the table. Which might take us back to episode 1 where she was fleeing with her daughter, and the daughter was like, "Where's Dad?"
Yeah, so it's not looking good for Magnus right now. Joe learned how to play the piano this episode and how to use it as a murder weapon. So, we don't know if he's dead, so he might just be really badly hurt.
Oh gosh, was that the piano? I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, it looked like he smacked his head on the piano.
It was the piano.
Yeah.
Yikes.
But who knows? Maybe he's okay. And then I just like, I really want things to work out for these characters. Yeah. And I'm like starting to get invested in their family. But it just seems like they're headed towards disaster. Oh, we also learned that Alice has developed the habit of feeling safe and hiding in cupboards.
Mystery solved.
Yes.
Cupboard mystery.
Like, so that's maybe why that keeps appearing.
Yeah. And this Alice has the darker necklace, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. We saw the brighter necklace on the space station before. So in this, whatever universe we're in, this is like the darker necklace, which is interesting to me.
So maybe that's how we know that this isn't our Joe's Alice. Because her necklace is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was so glad that we learned about the cupboards, because I was like, what is the deal with the cupboards?
It did feel really random, yeah.
And I also thought it was funny that Magnus was like trying to put Alice in the cupboard, and Joe was like, don't you put our daughter in a cupboard?
Yes. He's like, she needs to be in the cupboard right now, just go away. Yeah, so Alice has some unhealthy coping mechanisms, but she is only like 9, so it does seem like they have differing parenting styles.
Bud is being questioned by the FBI in this episode for his murder on the boat.
That's right. He is under investigation.
Yes. And we get some interesting things from him. You know, they kind of suggest that he's been seen by the boat cameras. But when the FBI goes to look at the footage, there's the weird...
the circles.
Yeah, the circle anomaly interference phenomenon is happening again, and it can't be seen. So is that when, in the previous episode, or the episode before that, when Henry was having his little, meet up with Irina and saw her as her other half, her sister?
His rendezvous, yeah.
His rendezvous. Like, was that related to that phenomenon, or what do you think, Carmen? Like, what?
I mean, so when Henry and I almost called him Buck. I know that's not his name, Bud. Yeah, when Henry and Bud, we can usually tell the difference because Henry's wearing glasses and Bud isn't, and Bud's been on the cruise ship pretty much the whole time. Henry was having his rendezvous And that's when Bud does the murder, and then we see Irina's face kind of be skeletal. In this episode, there's a moment where Joe sees Henry at his desk having a conversation with himself in the reflection of his computer monitor. And it's not clear if he's talking, if Henry and Bud are talking, or if he's like kind of giving himself a pep talk. And maybe that is what triggers the anomaly that destroys the footage, so the FBI agent can't see it.
I want to talk about that moment for a second because I thought it was interesting. So when Joe sneaks in after hours to the agency, and she's, doing her spectrometry and looking on the computer, when she's in her office, there's a couple of guys that come in to try to clean it out.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because she's, like, trying to talk to them, and she's like, hello, and clearly they're in the other universe. So it seems to be the universe where she died, and they're clearing out her office after she died. But it's a warmer-toned shot, which I noted for that scene. And then when Bud is talking to Henry, or talking to himself, it's also a warmer-toned shot. And it's unclear whether Bud can see our Joe. I know he turns his head and, like, says a comment like, curiosity killed the cat. But it seems like he can't really see her. I think it just happens to be that he turns this way. Or maybe he senses her, but it seems to be another, like, other universe because it's that kind of warm yellow tone.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The cinematography and the lighting are so great in this show. And it is cool to, like, have those visual cues. I was curious, though, of, like, since Joe and Henry are kind of, like, both hopping between universes, are they able to, like, see each other in those moments? That's why I was like, oh, dang, like, can Henry see Joe? Like, are they both, like, universe hopping at the same time? So, yeah, I definitely have more questions I want to know.
Me too. And I mean, right now we're basically talking about two universes, two realities that at least this show is focusing on. But I assume that there's probably more versions of things that could be happening. And if so, how many?
It seems like it might be.
But yeah, I'm excited.
I'm so excited.
I'm loving the show so far. How about you?
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I love that there's so many mysteries, so many new threads and questions. I can't wait to watch the next episode.
Me too. Oh, wait. One more thing. So, the picture in the cabin changed yet again.
Oh, yeah.
It was an angel at one point, and then it was a skeleton, and now it was a troll, and with a cauldron. And in this episode, our Alice is getting rid of books, and she mentions one about a troll, and they have to, like, take the baby and sacrifice it in order to get the mama back.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This Alice does seem very much aware that Joe is not her mother.
Is Alice going to be sacrificed?
I don't know. I don't know what it means. I hope not.
Yeah. We'll see.
We'll see. But thanks so much for watching. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. Tell us what you thought. We're at Take This TV on TikTok and Instagram. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the club. And remember, it's dangerous to watch TV alone.